I just have this kind of firm belief that we can shift our industry from being a carbon emitter, a big carbon emitter, to being a big carbon sink or a big carbon store. Really, it's the forests that are the sink, and the built environment can become a store. I'm just incredibly passionate and also very worried and terrified about the climate crisis and the speed at which it's escalating. But I think we have the ability in the built environment sector to make a huge difference.
Hello everyone and welcome to FutureX, a podcast by Martin Hurn, Event Director at Futurebuild, and co-host Dr. Oliver Jones, Research Director at Ryder Architecture. FutureX will bring together some of the brightest minds and some of the most disruptive thinkers and innovators to transform the construction industry and build a FutureX community of like-minded people that can begin to make a real change. We really hope you enjoy the series.
Hello and welcome to FutureX. I'm Martin Hurn, Event Director at Futurebuild, and once again joined by Dr. Oliver Jones at Ryder Architecture. Oliver, this week we're going nature-based.
Hello, Martin. What a great session this week. We're talking about all of the sort of glory of mass timber with one of the founders of ACAN, nonetheless.
Absolutely. Sticking on that sort of activist theme, but also going really plant-based as well. But don't worry, we're not going to change your diet. I know I'm actually like your barbecue, but, this whole plant-based movement, and, in particular, we're talking to Joe Giddings at Built by Nature, is hugely relevant at the moment, not only for its carbon benefits, but is one of the solutions to the mass housing that we need at the moment.
Absolutely, and we are gearing up in a big way with regards to research and our relationships and with advanced material startups in that biospace. Biogenic materials, whether it be the standard mass timber solution or whether it be other wood-based solutions. Or like we've discussed on other podcasts, whether it's mycelium or whether it's an algal-based biotech solution in the construction sector, we're seeing this more and more, and we're seeing this space accelerate. And I think it's an incredibly exciting aspect of construction that is only going to grow. And there's some phenomenal examples of mass timber buildings now, not only across Europe, but here in the UK.
Absolutely. And I think what's really interesting about Built by Nature as well is that they're really a network and organization that's quite unique. They've got funding behind them. They're funded by the Loudis Foundation. They're actively giving out grants for research and things that are going to accelerate the use of mass timber, not just in the UK, but right across Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'll hear me wax lyrical in our chat with Joe, as you well know, about the fact that these guys are genuinely really are pioneers in this space. I think what's exciting is that, there's clearly money behind this now. There's clearly big business is looking to get involved in bio-based materials and mass timber construction in a big way. I think there's challenges, and we talked to Joe a lot about those challenges around fire safety and some of the combustibility issues around timber. But overall, all in all, if we're going to meet our really, really challenging 2050 targets as regards to the environment, then we absolutely have to be thinking, how do we engage with more bio-based materials? And it's just not going to be done the same way. We're not going to be using clay bricks and phenolic panels in the same way that we're using them day in, day out now.
And I think that's one thing that stands out for me, actually, is that, half the time when we talk about, whether it's natural building products or, nature-based solutions or plant-based products, it sort of, in my mind, thinks about traditional materials, the sort of old materials. But actually, the amount of innovation now in this space is phenomenal. And you must be seeing this now on a sort of a day-to-day basis.
Totally, and I think what's really challenging and what's really coming to the fore is we've got the science, we've got the people who are bringing the solutions, but what we're realizing more and more every day is that it's behavior based as well as a huge social aspect to this. It's about ingrained behaviors. It's about what we feel comfortable with. It's about not taking the path of least resistance in terms of our projects and the way we design. And it's about looking to really sort of set a standard and trailblaze by piloting and demonstrating some of these really exciting new technologies, and in some cases not so new technologies, the likes of hemp and other things that we'll discuss in future podcasts.
Absolutely. Right. Should we get Joe on?
Oh, let's go for it. Hi, Joe. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
That's all right, mate. I guess one of the first things that we always kick off with in introducing you to the audience, it'd be fantastic to hear a little bit more about your journey, about who you are, where you came from, what education you went through, and how you found yourself where you currently are at the minute.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Joe Giddings. I am UK Networks lead at Built by Nature and campaigns coordinator at Architects Climate Action Network as well. And I'm actually an architect by training, by background. So I studied architecture at Oxford Brookes and then at Copenhagen, and then worked for a few years as an architect, practicing as an architect in London, working on mostly kind of residential projects kind of on the outskirts of London. And then I suppose everything kind of changed for me in 2019 when me and a few other kind of frustrated early career architects decided to get together and form the Architects Climate Action Network, which was off the back of a spring of climate activism. I don't know if you remember, in 2019 there was both Extinction Rebellion and the kind of school strikes going on at the same time, and climate just shot up the agenda. And me and another few architects who live in London, lived and practiced in London, went down to the occupation of Waterloo Bridge by Extinction Rebellion, and there was this amazing energy there actually, and they'd kind of turned it into this green, amazing public space. And what we kind of remarked upon was how good it was at raising awareness of the climate, but how it wasn't particularly kind of targeted or focused to the specific challenges that our industry is facing. And we wondered whether there was space for something like XR, but in the kind of architecture field, and so we kind of set about kind of trying to find aligned architects, and one thing led to another, and suddenly we had a network of 100 kind of passionate climate conscious architects on our hands by the end of 2019. Since then I've kind of left architecture in terms of my practice, and as I mentioned, I'm now working at Built by Nature, and we are a kind of network and a grant making fund specifically focused on increasing the use of timber in construction as a climate solution. So I suppose my work with ACAN kind of led into my role at Built by Nature, and I suppose that's me in a nutshell.
I guess before we dive into Built by Nature, tell us a bit about what those early days of forming ACAN were like. How did you go about that? Just what was it like?
Very exciting. I mean, there were, in the first summer before we kind of launched it, there were a group of 8 of us from different practices, kind of, I suppose, just deciding on how we would launch it, effectively just planning a launch party and deciding what topics we thought people might like to join to take action on. So things like embodied carbon, circular economy, existing buildings, etc., etc. So we were kind of designing the structure of this network and basically just organizing a launch party. And then the first 6 months after we launched were brilliant, just like a bit of a roller coaster. So we got into this rhythm of having really busy kind of like amazing kind of energetic meetings at different practices around London. Once every couple of weeks a practice would offer to host us, and we ended up getting kind of over 100 people to most of those, and everybody kind of having really passionate discussions about what needed to happen to change the industry. And And yeah, that was the kind of 6 months leading up to the pandemic. So it was like 6 months of really busy kind of busy events followed by 2 years of online meetings.
It's testament to the strong foundations that you guys laid at that time, though, that we went straight into a lockdown for 2 years, and actually, ACAN's not only still existing but appears to be thriving. And their takeover at Futurebuild this year was particularly sort of energetic, and there was a lot of engagement there. So something must have gone really right in those early days.
Yeah, it was amazing to see the energy that people were bringing, and we were totally surprised by the number of people that showed up. We thought we might get like 10 to 15, and then we got a few hundred. And the amazing thing about ACAN is that everybody basically brings their passion for whatever subject it is they want to see change in. So the structure of it kind of split into these different thematic groups means that everybody can find their place. And now it's kind of the momentum of it is carried by many people.
We're seeing huge uptake of architects in activism at the moment. We've talked, me and Oliver about this huge on the podcast. We've interviewed different groups as well. You mentioned Extinction Rebellion. There's people, architects cropping up in all of these. Why are architects getting so involved in activism at the moment?
I suppose I can kind of answer that question through the lens of ACAN, and I think a lot of architects, particularly early career ones, feel limited by the amount of change that they can achieve at their practice, and they also kind of recognize that these issues are kind of systemic, and there's only so much you can change on a single project, and it's really important to do as much as you can, but ultimately there are system level changes that need to happen, and they're only going to happen if people kind of get together. And I think there's been a big collective realization of that we as architects and other built environment professionals actually have a huge amount of expertise in how to decarbonize our built environment, and that can be shared with people who aren't in the sector and aren't in the industry. And we have a unique position there as kind of practitioners from the built environment to really push for the change that's needed there.
So it must be really exciting for you, Joe, to be able to move into an organization like Built by Nature, where you've actually now got funding behind you to really accelerate some of the challenges, that are out there. And you mentioned, accelerating the use of timber within the construction industry. Can you tell us about some of the challenges you're currently facing and maybe some of the sort of solutions you're looking for?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's very exciting to be a part of, and I think that's mainly because timber is for me and for Built by Nature, it represents a really positive, solution focused kind of view of how we can mitigate the climate crisis in the built environment. Timber is kind of ready-made climate solution that will help us kind of reduce embodied carbon emissions and store carbon in the built environment. So that is what we're working towards at Built by Nature, and it's really exciting to be part of it. It's quite a new organization, and my role is really around bringing together a network in the UK, which is made up of demand side stakeholders that want to accelerate the use of timber. So we talk to the supply side, but mainly we're focused on bringing together developers, designers, insurers, investors, cities, and asset owners, so all of those people on the demand side, and getting them to work together on some of the solutions to the challenges of using mass timber.
I guess one of the things I'd be really interested in sort of digging into a little bit, Joe, is what are the reasons that people are coming at you with for not using timber? We've probably all heard some of the are there enough trees? Should we be using trees to sequester carbon? Can we cut them all down to make buildings? What are the reasons that you're hearing sort of day to day on the ground as to what those challenges are?
Yeah, well, also it's probably worth remarking on the reasons that people want to use timber. I mean, it just comes from everybody. I mean, the very large private developers that we're working with, some kind of household names really, and this includes people like Lend-Lease, who we're working together with on a project, which you can look at on the Built by Nature website. But many of the kind of UK's largest private developers are already sold on the fact that timber is a solution for them. They want to transition their development pipelines to using mass timber. But they, as you point out, they're kind of struggling in some cases because there are significant challenges. These are mainly to do with insurance and I suppose the challenge of gaining insurance at an affordable price for mass timber buildings, and also to do with kind of demonstrating fire safety and meeting the regulations and those kind of things.
We've talked previously about some of the challenges that are around timber uptake in the construction sector. I think as a practice writer, I've got an office in Vancouver, and in British Columbia, the timber sector is incredibly mature, pretty as are the standards and regulations and the ecosystem that it exists in. What do you think we need in the UK context? Big question for you there, Joe, but what do you think we need in the UK context, or what do we need to start really working on and looking at in order to get more mass timber into the market?
Yeah, well, I think it really comes down to bringing the insurance sector and the construction industry closer together on why mass timber is important, the climate benefits of it, and importantly, how you can mitigate risk and manage risk on mass timber projects, because that's what the insurers are concerned about. They're concerned about the risk of fire and water ingress and water damage. So it's the perils of fire and water. So really what we need to do is bring the latest knowledge and understanding from the construction sector and the design sector to the insurers, and really just increase that level of dialogue, I think, so that the insurance sector is up to speed on how best to mitigate the risks on mass timber buildings. And I mean, one of the things that we're working on at the moment, I mean, we're working quite closely with people in the insurance industry. So Gallagher, an example, they're a broking firm, so we work closely with this guy Dominic Lyon on a semi-regular series of webinars on timber. So we're presenting the latest understanding of mass timber to property insurance underwriters, so just trying to increase their understanding about what mass timber is and how it works.
Do you think we've got a sort of a long ingrained history of being sort of cautious around the use of timber in England? You look across the border, and Scotland seem to be pretty chilled out about their use of timber. A lot of their housing's stick frame. Do you think it's slightly different in England?
I think it's different in the sense that 5 years ago we had a really significant disaster in Grenfell Tower, and that's really shifted things. I mean, but prior to Grenfell, we had a lot of quite tall timber buildings going up in and around London and across the country, really. And it's worth pointing out that we do actually still have quite a lot of timber buildings being built around the UK. They've just kind of shifted away from tall resi to other sectors like education and offices. But I think in the wake of Grenfell, everything's changed, obviously, as the government's kind of placed the onus on combustibility, really focused in on combustibility of materials rather than kind of performance-based approaches, which, as we know, mass timber performs quite well in the fire, but it is technically combustible. And so I suppose the regulations focusing on combustibility, that's sent shockwaves out into other sectors like insurance, where they see that timber is combustible and they are concerned. And so it's really just taking them on that journey, but we are still living in that in the wake of Grenfell, I think, and the regulatory changes that have come in since then.
You're right about that focus on combustibility. I mean, do you see the market coming into play by involving other performance metrics further down the line? There has to be a meeting point of the environmental discussion alongside all of the other performance metrics and criteria of the materials, and even the social impact of where we're sourcing our materials from. And timber seems to be a phenomenal option in that respect.
Yeah, it really does. And I think we're starting to see a lot of movement towards it and bringing all those strands together. I mean, what makes me quite hopeful is that we now have kind of cross-departmental efforts going on in the government to I suppose like bring in policy that encourages the use of timber in construction. So we've got DEFRA, BEIS and DLUC all kind of working together to develop a kind of policy roadmap, and that to me signals that there is intent from the government to shape policy to support timber. So I feel like we're gonna make some progress in the next few years.
So you might be able to straighten me out, Joe, on a few sort of topics here or facts. And apologies for sort of throwing them at you mid podcast. I was always under the impression that we, as in the UK, we don't utilize a lot of our own grown timber for construction. It tends to be imported, and is that a missed opportunity? I suppose is one aspect, and also why is it to do with the ratings and the gradings of the timber that we're expecting it to perform at? Could it perform at a lower level? I suppose that's the first sort of thing I'm going to throw out there, just to respond to, Joe.
Yeah, I think, I should point out that I'm not a kind of forestry expert, but from what I understand, it is to do with the gradings of the wood that we have. And we do use a lot of imported timber, that's right. And I think that is a missed opportunity. Yeah, we have a big kind of forestry industry up in Scotland, and we have a kind of emerging one in Wales as well. And I think we can really maximize the opportunities to use that wood. I don't know if you saw during COP last year, Construction Scotland Innovation Centre, which I think has changed its name to BEST or something like that, BEST. They built a demonstration kind of 2-story house out of homegrown Scottish CLT. Well, it wasn't just CLT, it was also Dow laminated timber and glulam. So they really tested out different methods there. They built 2 of these things, and then they set fire to one of them, not just for fun, to demonstrate its fire performance. And I think what they really showed was that you actually can make mass timber out of UK grown wood, and that it is possible essentially. So I also feel quite hopeful about this. I mean, I don't know if you saw the news kind of last year that Binderholz, the Austrian kind of mass timber producer, bought up the biggest sawmill group in the UK, BSW. And from what I'm seeing and hearing, or from around the industry, it sounds as if they're going to invest in infrastructure to produce CLT or other mass timber elements here on our little island. So hopefully we'll have a local source very soon.
Well, it always struck me, the other rumor that was circulating quite heavily last year was the Great Forest of the North. So, the Newcastle, where I'm currently located at the moment, will be surrounded by forestry. I guess in our country as well, there's a need for longer term planning, I suppose. That goes for a lot of things, but particularly around forestry. And I remember speaking to the guys in Denmark, a couple of the big companies in Denmark, around their timber use and the timber economy over there. And it just really struck me that the planning was it was a 100-year plan that was being laid out for the use of the forestry plan and the timber economy there. I feel like we've got a little way to go as a country to sort of get that level of planning in place.
Yeah, I think so. But I suppose so. I mentioned 3 government departments that we're looking at this earlier, and one of them that is leading that is DEFRA, which I find quite interesting because they're looking at this from the point of view of how can we increase forest coverage in the UK. I think they're only looking at increasing it like 2% or something, but even so, that's 2% on top of what is currently, I think, 10%. So even that would be a big shift. And I've been speaking to people in Ireland recently as well. There's a huge kind of crop of trees that's about to be harvested over there. So I do feel like there's a lot of scope. There's a lot of potential wood about to come into our kind of market.
And I guess let's roll this back a little bit, and just for the audience take us through the sort of jobs that you're doing, or your day-to-day tasks in Built by Nature. You know, what are you guys working on now?
Yeah, so my day-to-day tasks really are around organising meetups and events for our UK network. So I mentioned earlier the 6 kind of target stakeholder groups that we're looking to work with, from developers all the way to kind of cities. So my day-to-day is really kind of organising regular meetups on different topics. I'm currently working on organising one to do with fire safety and the regulations, and kind of speaking to as many fire engineers as I can to try and find out, hear different perspectives on what fire engineers think we need to do to overcome the current kind of difficulties with gaining kind of approvals and getting fire tests done and things like that. So I'm trying to kind of get in touch with fire engineers. I mean, other things that we're working on at the moment are to do with insurance. So we've just agreed grants. We've just funded a project which is being led by the ASBP, Alliance for Sustainable Building Products, and they're going to be working with Phil Callow, who is of Mass Timber Risk Consulting. So he's a former kind of construction insurance underwriter. So they are writing a kind of mass timber insurance playbook. So it's a step-by-step guide for developers and designers on how to approach the insurance sector if you're working on a mass timber building, through the ROBA stages, what you need to do at each stage, what kind of information you need to present, that kind of thing. So we're really looking for solutions to these challenges, trying to identify them and build project teams around them, and then, if we can, support them with the Accelerator Fund.
And Joe, as an organisation or as a network, you're quite unique because you're obviously backed by the Louders Foundation, which is, funds the Well GBC and the Danish, GBC, but gives you an accelerator grant sort of funding as well, doesn't it? Can you tell us some of the things that you've already funded in the timber space, and maybe some of the things that you're looking or want people to to apply to help with?
Yeah, sure. So in the UK, recently, kind of a few months ago, we kicked off a project with DRMM, the architecture firm. So they're working together with Quality of Life Foundation and NMITE, which is the New Model Institute for Technology and Engineering, I think, new kind of academic institution in Herefordshire. So what DRMM and their team are doing are looking at 5 mass timber buildings in detail, doing very rigorous whole life carbon assessments, and doing post-occupancy evaluation on those buildings as well. So they're kind of bringing together the arguments in terms of improved well-being into the buildings with the kind of carbon argument, and they're presenting this as a series of case studies. So what we wanted to do there was to essentially continue to strengthen the carbon case for timber. So hopefully these will be some of the most kind of detailed and rigorous whole life carbon assessments that have been done of mass timber buildings, and they'll be working on that over the next 6 months and kind of publishing it next year. And another project from the UK that was initially funded by the Louders Foundation, but kind of has come over to Built by Nature since we've been established, is the new model building by War Thistleton Architects with Bura Happold and UCL. And this is looking at timber buildings from a slightly different angle. So it's effectively developed, they have developed a kind of 6-story residential building which meets current regulations, doesn't have any combustible materials in the external wall, but is mass timber structure internally. And what they've done is taken that design and gone to a national warranty provider to effectively kind of pre-approve all of the construction details in there. And this is going to conclude in the next couple of months, and we hope it will be published probably September, maybe October. And what that will do is provide a series of details that others can then apply to residential buildings. And effectively they'll be pre-approved or pre-warranted. So hopefully this should unlock kind of 6-story and below mass timber residential construction, which is struggling at the moment in the UK. So those are 2 examples of kind of projects in the UK that we've recently funded.
Carrying on Oliver's sort of timber myths, I've got another one for you, which is something I hear quite often, is that people keep on telling me that architects don't get enough training in the use of timber design, you know, through their university or part 1, part 2. Do you see that is that sort of an area we should be focusing on, really, and ingraining it into, you know, people's design philosophies from the start?
Yeah, I think it's not just architects either. From what I hear, it's structural engineers, fire consulting engineers as well. I think it's across the spectrum. Like we're not really educating our next generation of practitioners on timber and how it works. I know that TD UK are doing quite a lot of work in the education space, and you probably know Tab Binding, who is an absolute superstar, and she's single-handedly kind of driving the education of the next generation, I think, in terms of timber. She's doing loads and loads with universities around the country. So yeah, I've got kind of confidence in TD UK and what they're doing. But you're right. I mean, we need to be educating everybody who's coming into this industry on how timber buildings work and how they're different from concrete and steel buildings.
Absolutely. And then, sort of, what are the challenges or that you want to address? You know, you're sat there with, well, hopefully quite a lot of money behind yourselves. You know, you've got some grants to give out. You know, and so how can people get involved with Built by Nature?
Yeah, so we're in the UK, really. We're kind of, as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of focused on insurance and fire safety and the regulations. In addition to that, we will continue to try and develop the carbon case for timber. I think there is still some work to be done around, you know, end of life questions for timber, what happens at the end of its life, and increasing our understanding of how different forestry practices might affect the kind of carbon cycles at the beginning of the life cycle. So we're looking at doing some work around that, and we'll hopefully have an open challenge to announce later this year that's kind of on that subject of traceability, verification of sequestered carbon and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's really around those 3 subjects, really. It's insurance, kind of fire and carbon we're focused on in the UK. And Built by Nature does have a kind of expression of interest form on its website. So if you think you've got an idea for a bit of research or a demonstration project or anything really that you think might help solve some of those challenges, then I would encourage you to just put in an expression of interest through the form on our website. That will come through to me and my colleagues, and then we're kind of piecing them all together into a big jigsaw of things that we hope to tackle all of those bases. Yeah, but I mean, we're also working on a kind of proactive level on trying to bring together grants through our network. So as well as those expressions of interest, if you're involved in our networks, we're kind of working proactively with some of those companies to bring projects together like that.
So Joe, you're clearly super knowledgeable and doing an amazing job for Built by Nature. Yeah, what is it? Tell us, what is it that gets you out of bed in the morning? What what really makes you passionate? What drives you?
I just have this kind of firm belief that we can shift our industry from being a carbon emitter, a big carbon emitter, to being a big carbon sink or a big carbon store. Really, it's the forests that are the sink, and the built environment can become a store. I'm just incredibly passionate and also very worried and terrified about the climate crisis and the speed at which it's escalating. But I think we have the ability in the built environment sector to make a huge difference. You know, we're responsible for like 40% of emissions in most countries and globally. So we really have a big responsibility, but a big opportunity as well. So it's that kind of big overarching mission of turning our built environment into a carbon emitter, to a carbon store, that kind of drives me, and that's why I get out of bed in the morning, I think.
And on your website, there's some great front runner examples, I think you guys call them. And who are you engaging with outside of the UK?
Yeah, so yeah, so I'm just responsible really for the UK network, but we do have a kind of pan-European network as well. So it's the 27 EU countries plus UK, Norway, and Switzerland that we're focusing on at the moment. We have a number of partner organizations which are looking at different parts of the supply chain. So some of these are Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, Bauhaus Earth, which you might have heard of, Climate Kick as well, an organization that we've recently funded to do a project in Milan. So those are some of our kind of partner organizations. We're also working quite closely with people like Cromwell, who are an real estate investment firm, and Dasos Capital. So Dasos Capital and Cromwell have both recently announced, I think it was last year, this big 1 billion kind of timber construction fund. So they're included in our kind of front runner network. Dasos are from Finland, I think. Cromwell possibly the Netherlands. I'll be corrected on that.
You've just described as sort of how you've professionalized your earlier activism in a pan-European network. You've taken the ethos that you took to the founding of ACAN to sort of a professionalized environment of really pushing mass timber on a pan-European level. There, it sounds, it's a super exciting calling and a fantastic project.
Yeah, I mean, I really do think that we have to work quite closely with these big kind of the big firms, big organizations that are driving our built environment, the investors and the developers. So yeah, through Built by Nature, that's really the types of organization that we're trying to work with.
Are you guys exploring other options? So alongside mass timber, are you guys exploring the use of wood-based products elsewhere in the construction chain?
Yeah. I mean, our overriding vision, I suppose, at Built by Nature is for a built environment that works in unison with nature. So obviously mass timber is not the only solution there. I think in the UK, we're focused at the moment on mass timber, and across Europe, we're focused on timber generally as our first kind of initial focus. I think if you look at the kind of readiness of timber as a solution, it's really kind of there, ready to be implemented. So we want to focus first on that, and then potentially in the future widen out to other bio-based materials as well.
Well, we've got plenty of those to talk to you about, Joe. We've got podcast upon podcast of other bio-based products. So you will be looking at things like the mycelium space and macroalgae, and using those products in construction as well further down the line.
Yeah, well, one thing that's come across my radar recently, which is probably already on yours, that you're well aware of, is miscanthus, which is a quick growing grass, which is a perennial that you can cut down. You don't have to reseed, it just grows again, and you can do this for 20 years and it grows to like 12 feet or something. So you can have 12-foot long miscanthus bales, which to me just sounds like an amazing thing, and just something that we could really utilize in construction. I mean, I think straw and miscanthus and hemp all have huge potential for the built environment.
I think it's really exciting that you guys are wholeheartedly supporting and funding this kind of European-wide effort into introducing bio-based materials and other biogenic materials into the construction chain. I think it's well overdue. I think it might take quite a long time for us to see and feel the benefit, unfortunately, but unless we've got guys like you and organizations like Built by Nature really grinding, making it happen, we're not going to get there. You mentioned the work of tab binding in the university space. Well, we've still got to wait for all those really enthusiastic, encouraged young professionals to come through into the industry. So I think anybody that's really pushing it now is sort of truly pioneering in that space. So I look forward to sort of following the work of Built by Nature and probably launching a few requests for funding your way, Joe, by the sounds of it.
Please do.
So what's your preferred way for people to follow the work of Built by Nature, and how do people get in touch with you guys?
So on our website, there are forms where you can kind of join our networks. That will kind of add you to our mailing list, and you'll kind of get quarterly updates through those. We also post quite a lot on LinkedIn, so follow us on LinkedIn, where you'll get much more regular updates, kind of weekly updates. We tend to post on there about things that we've just funded or events that we've run, or just articles that we find inspiring. I mean, we also have a resources page on our website, which is fairly new, and we're growing as well, but it's a place that we're hoping to gather resources on timber, whether that's to do with financing timber, business models, or just construction details, or something to do with insurance, whatever it is. We're kind of compiling these on our website as well. So yeah, check that out.
I guess we always sort of wrap up our chats, Joe, by asking our guests what's the future that they'd like to see. So you haven't had any time to prepare an answer to this, so I'm sure there's a burning description in there of what kind of future would you like to see in the construction sector.
You know what, I believe in kind of dense cities and dense urban development, and I think in the future we will be building on top of our cities with wood. We'll be infilling brownfield sites with tall timber buildings. We'll be living in kind of 10-story residential neighborhoods that are all built out of wood and might have straw kind of facade systems or something like that. There'll probably be gardens on top of all of these buildings and trees throughout the streets, and there'll be green, lovely, car-free neighborhoods that we can run around in with our kids.
Oh, mate, sounds like an absolute dream of a future. So I just want to say thanks, Joe. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for introducing us to the work that you guys are doing, and really, really excited to sort of follow that work and encourage the audience to do so as well.
Thanks both. Thanks for having me on. Cheers.
Oliver, I'm sure this is an organisation you're going to get in touch with.
Mate, I'm writing the funding proposal as we speak.
So, as Joe's talked about there, it's a fantastic organisation to get involved in. They have accelerator grants. You can find out all the information on their website. Finally, if you enjoyed this, please like, share and subscribe. And we'll be back soon with another episode of FutureX.
Join our community to stay up to date with all things FutureX. Visit futurebuild.co.uk to sign up. Please also like them and share them to help grow our community. You can subscribe to the podcasts within your favourite podcast platform. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you'll be back again soon.